Professor Dwork is a teacher and a mentor, and she's committed to training the next generation of Holocaust scholars. I'd like to invite you to join me in welcoming her this evening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Toby. Thank you for the honor you show my work with your invitation to deliver the 5th annual Alfred Wiener Holocaust Lecture. I am grateful to the Wiener Holocaust Library and to Gresham College. Most particularly, I thank every single person here and online. Perhaps particularly this entire school group, which has traveled half an hour to come to hear the lecture tonight. So let's give them a round of applause. I thank you for the gifts of your interest and your time. On your seats, you will have seen a list of terms. The good news is there's no final exam. The point of the list is because if you are, like I am, and you come to a term or a word you don't know, you turn to the person next to you and you say, "What'd she say?" So this stops you from needing to do that because it'll be there. The other point in having this list is that the words are listed in the order in which I will discuss them. So when you're wondering whether this woman is ever going to stop talking, take a look at the list, see where we are, and pace yourselves. We will get to the end. I will speak for 40 minutes, plus minus 10%, depending upon how often I breathe. But I was told that indeed that was your limit and mine. So as Toby mentioned, my talk tonight draws upon my book, Saints and Liars, which will be published in January of next year, so quite soon. And it deals with American relief and rescue workers. Few of the Americans who hurtled into action on behalf of the victims of the Nazis and their allies are known today. I will introduce a couple of them to you. You will see that women figured prominently in these initiatives. Philanthropy and service had long been women's work, but this philanthropy and these overseas assignments offered the women avenues for independent action. And their experiences changed them. Their work was transformative for the people they helped, and transformative for them themselves. If my book pays particular attention to gender, it also plumbs the role of the unpredictable and the irrational. Historians have traditionally focused on social class, occupation, religion, race, age, and gender. But we have shied away from the unpredictable, the importance of timing, luck, chance, fortuitous circumstances. Frankly, we don't know what to do with those factors, so we don't do much. An example to illustrate my point. Hannah Starkman, she should be on your list. You're with me? Hannah Starkman, then aged about 12, was with her mother and brother Henrik in the German-imposed ghetto in the Polish city of Radom. And now from Hannah's oral history. One night, we heard shooting. We went to the window, and we saw people running and German soldiers shooting. We got dressed, and then a couple minutes later, we heard German soldiers in the building yelling, "Raus, raus, raus." So we all went out, and there were masses of people on the street. You could go either to the right or the left into the middle of the street. We stood there for, I don't know, an hour. And then they told us to go back into the apartment house. We didn't know what happened. We found out later. Radom had two ghettos, a small ghetto and a large on one side of town, and the bigger ghetto where we were in another part of town. The Germans sent out everybody from the small ghetto to the Treblinka annihilation camp. They had a few cars, those cattle cars, left, so they needed more people to fill them. So they got all of the people from the big ghetto out on the street, and they counted how many people they needed to fill the cars they had left. So some of our neighbors who, when they left the apartment, went to the right, were sent to Treblinka that night. And we, because we went to the left, we were not sent away. The luck of the draw. So later on, when my brother came home from work and my neighbor's son came, he didn't find his mother and sister. My brother found us. It was just one of those things. I'm not minimizing the importance of ideology, policy, and practice. Were it not for ideology, policy, and practice, Hannah would not have been in that situation at all. But at that very moment, luck and fortuitous circumstance shaped her fate. And then there's the even messier role of the irrational, emotions, human relations. Our Americans were operatives of improbable courage, resourcefulness, and resilience. They were fueled by principles, to be sure, but they were fueled too by personal and professional ambition, eagerness to actualize their potential, a taste for adventure, and frustration with limitations. Social ties and connections counted for a lot with them. Emotions played no small role, as did spontaneous responses. Recognizing and acknowledging the role of the unpredictable and the irrational prompts us to imagine history as a time as full and rich as our own. And now, a microhistory to illustrate. Prague, 1939. Martha and Waitstill Sharp stepped off a train into Prague's Wilson Station on a cold February day in 1939. Selected by the Unitarian leadership in Boston to travel to Czechoslovakia, they were charged with aiding the 250,000 refugees who had fled from the Czech borderland district of Sudetenland into the Czech heartland of Bohemia and Moravia as a result of the Munich Agreement. The Munich Pact galvanized the American Unitarian Association, which I now will call AUA, American Unitarian Association, 4,000 miles away. Now note, when the Germans had marched into Austria half a year earlier, no one did anything. None of the Unitarians bestirred themselves. No one jumped into action. The assault on Czechoslovakia, by contrast, seared the Unitarian leadership's political imagination and emotional heart. In 1938, Czechoslovakia was home to a small Unitarian community, but ties of kinship and friendship abounded between the Unitarians in the United States and Czechoslovakia, and these bonds added gravity to the AUA assessment of the situation. I have just listened to the news broadcast from Prague in regard to the Czech crisis. One Howard Matson wrote to AUA President Frederick Elliott, "We Unitarians have so many connections with our fellows in Czechoslovakia that we have a special obligation for action." If personal relations triggered a response, so did denominational history. The Quakers had a service committee. The Unitarians could too. We are a body somewhat larger than the Quakers. We are a body that is at least as wealthy as the Quakers. And for almost a quarter of a century, the Quakers have pioneered in this field of dealing with people in distress. Robert Dexter, who was director of the AUA Department of Foreign Relations, he pointed this out to the board of directors. The Quakers' service work augmented their stature. The Unitarians could develop their public profile too. The AUA board agreed and dispatched Dexter to Europe. He was joined by Robert Wood, a Philadelphia Quaker. Refugees crowded into Prague. Many needed to emigrate immediately, Wood and Dexter reported. To the best they could ascertain, and now I'm quoting from their report, 92,000 refugees have registered from the Sudetenland, and the estimates are that there are over 150,000 more scattered in private homes and small villages who have not registered. Jews in particular sought to make themselves invisible, afraid they would be deported. And where could they go? Faced with this assignment, the Unitarian leadership did not dither. They looked for a minister and his wife to serve as field representatives of a new Commission for Service in Czechoslovakia. According to Waitstill, 17 pastors, men, and their wives were approached. All declined. He and Martha were the 18th couple, and they accepted. They sailed for Europe 2 weeks later. She was 33, he 37. They took $41,000 in relief funds to disperse, and they left their 2-year-old daughter, Martha Content, and their 7-year-old son, Hastings, with family friends. Waitstill wanted Martha as his partner in this endeavor, and she wished to undertake the work. Still, parting with her children stood contrary to gender role norms and hinted at an ambition to make her mark beyond the home. Grave problems loomed ahead. Reports from Prague had alerted the Sharps to the increasingly grim situation of refugees pouring into the city, and, more ominously, of Gestapo infiltration and unexplained individual disappearances. Arriving in Czechoslovakia, the Sharps' primary goal was to offer relief, helping to feed and clothe thousands of destitute people. Immigration of persons at risk was key too. With the help of trilingual Czech students, Martha processed dossiers of people needing to escape, particularly German Social Democrats and Jews. The situation grew urgent after the Germans rolled into Czechoslovakia on March 15th. The Einmarsch, or invasion, was the turning point. Germany jammed BBC transmissions. There were no newspapers. The Sharps, like many others, were subject to constant surveillance in the street and elsewhere. The couple's focus shifted. With the German occupation, our entire project had to be changed with the main emphasis on emigration, they reported to headquarters in Boston. But whom to help? This question plagued relief and rescue workers throughout the Nazi era. We are a service committee, not a major relief organization, Robert Dexter emphasized. Please bear in mind what has been our major aim from the beginning, namely, the salvaging of worthwhile people who are in danger in Europe because of their democratic attitudes. Or, as Waitstill put it, these then were to be snatched from the burning. Intellectuals, editors, social workers, professors, clergymen, research specialists, lawyers, physicians, whose political records made it necessary for them to flee. The Unitarians' mission was clear in principle: save leaders, Gentile or Jewish, with liberal values, who would return to their countries of origin when the Third Reich fell to rebuild their countries. They were the worthwhile people, mostly male, universally well-educated, and predominantly middle class. But life on the ground widened the Sharps' scope. And when an opportunity opened not 10 days after the Einmarsch to lead a convoy of 35 desperate people to safety in London, Martha took ownership immediately. Friday, March 24th, 1939. Waitstill was in Brussels when Tessa Rowntree, an English Quaker representing the British Committee for Refugees from Czechoslovakia. Trust me, it's the last time I'm going to use that whole name. BCRC. Anyway, when Tessa Rowntree tapped Martha to conduct a group of refugees traveling to England. Their papers were in order. The adults had British visas identifying them as domestic workers, and they had German exit visas, Ausreise. Rowntree would accompany some 50 on a train departing at 4 o'clock that afternoon. Would Martha take the rest on the 4:30 train? Martha was an American and a minister's wife. Those were factors in her favor. She did not have an Ausreise, but as she had arrived before the Einmarsch, she could get one locally. She did not need to apply to Berlin. Martha understood that the mission was fraught with danger, and I quote from her, "I knew that the household workers included some of the most wanted politicals, ardent and well-known anti-Nazis. If the Gestapo should charge us with assisting the enemies of the state to escape, prison would be a light sentence. Torture and death were the usual punishment. But," she calculated, "saving endangered people seemed worth the risk." Rescue initiatives depended upon many factors: luck, chance, fortuitous circumstances, trustworthy people, timing. Once she decided, Martha raced against the clock to get the papers she needed. She turned to the U.S. legation, which phoned the Gestapo on her behalf to ask for exit and reentry visas. The officer agreed to issue them in 10 days' time. Martha hurried to the Gestapo office to press the process forward in person. It was closed for lunch. The doors opened again at 2, but she had to wait for a superior officer. Martha finally got the documents signed at 3 o'clock. Remember, this train is at 4:30. I had just time to get back into the office, pick up some papers, and to leave a note for Waitstill explaining that I was going to London with Tessa's refugees. A Czech colleague caught her at the door and, learning she was about to leave for England, asked her to take on another clandestine task. The colleague's mother needed an operation, and the sale of her gems abroad would cover the cost. Suitcase in tow and jewelry in her traveling case, Martha arrived at the station where she found Miss Bull, BCRC secretary, compiling a list of the convoy participants as they appeared. She used a fountain pen filled with green ink that she borrowed from a man, a physician, standing near her. Often, Nazi targets came out of hiding just in time to board a moving train. And indeed, in this case, 2 newsmen, one from the United Press and the other from the Associated Press, jumped on at the last minute. Martha's charges occupied 1 car. The journey proceeded fitfully, with their wagon unhitched and shunted to the side for hours at a time. Finally, nearing the Dutch border, the convoy was ordered to disembark for customs inspection. Martha's effects were given only a cursory glance. The jewels were undetected, but the Germans robbed the refugees of all their valuables, even their wedding rings off their fingers. Martha fumed. Waiting to ensure everyone got back on the train, she heard a cry from the rear of the customs shed. I ran back and opened the door before the guards could stop me. There were the newspaper men, stripped to the waist, bags torn apart. Asking if anyone spoke English and learning that no one did, she picked up a letter that happened to be laying there with a United States seal, hoping it would serve. This letter puts this man under my protection as an American citizen, she thundered. You see the seal of the United States? He and the others are members of my group going to London, and I will not leave without them. Then, waving Miss Bull's notes in the air, she declared, they are all on the list. Against all odds, she prevailed, and the newsmen were allowed to rejoin the group. The train soon reached the border, and Martha surrendered Miss Bull's list to the Dutch officials to check it against the refugees' visas and papers. But having jumped on the train at the last minute, the newsman had not been registered by the BCRC secretary. The Dutch authorities barred their entry. Martha reached for a solution. I ran along the car looking for the doctor with the pen filled with green ink. With the pen, I wrote the names of the men on the reverse side of the list, and just before the train was to pull out, I found the passport officer. He quizzed her. I am sure those names were not there before. But she insisted, and they were allowed to board. It was the second near disaster, and she marveled, such a thin line between life and death. Nazi Germany's aggression and the AUA and BCRC determination to aid targets of the regime framed the event. Were it not for German policy, ideology, and actions on the ground, there would not have been a convoy. And social class, gender, age, religion, and profession were key factors in determining who was in that convoy that day. Still, training a close lens on this rescue initiative as it unfolded yields additional information. It makes visible what is hidden in the larger picture, the role of the unpredictable. The fortuitous circumstance first of the letter with an official American government seal, and then the unusual green ink that saved the newsmen from detention and interrogation at the least and enabled them to proceed. The chance factor of a seal and of green ink, in short, afforded that margin of credibility the situation required. The convoy had left Prague on Friday, March 24th, 1939. The 35 people under Martha's charge, who all arrived safely in London on Sunday, March 26, understood the significance of her help. Dear Mrs. Sharp, a group note reads, "We shall never forget what you have done for us and wish to thank you from the depth of our hearts. Yours gratefully." If rescue initiatives turned on unpredictable factors, they also turned on irrational prompts. Within a fortnight of the Einmarsch, Martha chose to put herself in danger in order to save lives. She knew what she risked and the possible consequences. It was a principled decision, and it was an impulsive decision, spurred by her loathing for the Nazi regime and appreciation for bold action. Now she and Waitstill committed to the rescue of as many Nazi targets as possible. Shortly after Martha returned from London to Prague, the Germans summarily evicted the Sharps and their staff from their offices. Undaunted by the sight of their files and furnishings on the ground, Martha, Waitstill was in Paris this time, soon found new quarters and resumed operations. The staff she had hired continued to work with her. Comprising 4 young Jewish couples, they interviewed clients and identified people with a special claim to Unitarian support. Investigating the university students who applied for aid to flee the country, the staff selected young intellectuals, physicians, lawyers, and clergy. In Waitstill's estimation, this may have been the most valuable single thing the staff did before their martyrdom at the hands of the Nazis. Waitstill erred. They were not martyred. They were murdered. No one saved those young couples, and they could not save themselves. The Jewish staff, as Waitstill lamented, all went to the gas chambers, every one of them, including one couple, the Vellers, who had passports, but young Mr. Veller's middle initial D had been incorrectly recorded as O, and that discrepancy prompted the British government to deny him entry. In the spring and summer of 1939, however, the staff identified those likely to make a cultural contribution if we could save their lives. To that end, Waitstill granted 10,000 crowns to each young person fleeing now, this is Waitstill's words, simply because the Germans consider Czechoslovakia a vast concentration camp. Their clandestine escape route took them to the coal fields of Moravska Ostrava, where they sought out the Tipples, great steel structures with wheels atop. These signaled entrance to a mine. The young people descended, and there, below ground, met with Polish student resistors. The Czechs doffed their clothes and donned a Polish railway or postal worker uniform. They then walked through the underground mine galleries until they passed the Polish border. Exiting into Poland, they were taken to the seaport of Gdynia and spirited onto British submarines. And landing in England, they were greeted by British Army, Navy, and Air Force recruiting officers. Dedicated as the Sharps were to rescuing political leaders with liberal values and humanitarian intellectuals, by this point they recognized that Jews stood at special risk. And I quote from them, "Whereas Jews in Germany and Austria could escape to Czechoslovakia, Jews in the Protectorate now have no place to go, save concentration camps from which only foreign aid can liberate them. Indeed, in the Sharps' view," and I quote, "the Jewish question has become a moral problem for the whole of Europe." Most immediately, however, it became a flashpoint between the Unitarians and the Quakers. As the stakes mounted, so did rivalries. United in their commitment to relief and rescue, the Unitarians and the Quakers nevertheless differed with regard to philosophy and ideology. The Unitarians sought to save politically liberal leaders as well as the intellectual and artistic elite. The Quakers claimed not to discriminate. The Unitarians pursued a militantly pro-democratic political program, proved willing to engage in illegal financial transactions, and did not blink at covert operations. The Quakers, by contrast, pursued a militantly humanitarian project, embraced pacifist neutrality, and were punctiliously law-abiding. Then, too, organizational reputations and prestige were at stake, and each wanted the public acclaim that would accompany success. Discord abounded. These clashes offer insights about relief and rescue efforts. They betray the operatives' overwhelming uncertainty, anxiety, and the pressure they felt. The discord encouraged us to appreciate anew that while the operatives' choices, the courses they pursued, seem straightforward in retrospect, no such clarity existed at the time. Confusion reigned. Grappling with an ever-changing situation with which they had no prior experience, no one knew the best way forward, and tempers flared. Then, too, perhaps these antagonisms suggest something about the people who undertook this work. Maybe placid people stayed home. In any case, little time remained for the Sharps' mission. They were due to return to the U.S. in August, and the other foreign refugee organizations had received official termination notices effective July 25th. Wade still left to speak at a youth conference in Switzerland on August 8. Martha remained in Prague winding up her emigration cases until a friend sent her a message advising her immediate departure. "I have heard that you will be arrested on Wednesday." She left on Tuesday. She learned later that the Gestapo did, in fact, come to arrest her the next day. According to the AUA, Martha had handled the emigration of 3,500 families, but we will never know the precise number or what percentage managed to escape and then to survive. Martha and Waitstill's efforts proved transformative. They saved lives through their legal and clandestine emigration aid. Martha and Waitstill were changed too. Martha's tenure in Prague was but the beginning of a previously unimagined professional trajectory. Waitstill broached the prospect of Martha's possible opportunities with her. You will be returning from this experience abroad with, I believe, a good deal of prestige, he predicted. At the same time, he asked her to take a short break from the work that earned her this esteem in order to go on holiday with him in Switzerland. But her emotional center rested on rescue activities. Writing to Waitstill, she admitted, "Somehow, I seem to have dried up emotionally, spiritually, and every other good way. But I send you my best, such as it is." Waitstill held little hope that Martha would agree to join him, but he pressed her again. "Now the time has come to decide finally whether or not you are going to Switzerland. There's no use making a reservation if you are intending to stay by your beloved cases." "My darling Waitstill," she replied, "I am terribly lonely without you. I think that the experience here has made me realize how much I love you. We need more quiet times together when we aren't really rushed to death by the clock. Somehow, we've got to begin to tell the world where it gets off." She didn't, nor did he. I fast forward through the war and their work in France and Portugal, their individual decisions to leave the USC for other relief and rescue organizations, to the Democratic Party invitation to Martha to run for House of Representatives in 1946. At that point, Martha was at home in Massachusetts with the children, but often on the road as a key fundraising speaker for Hadassah and Youth Aliyah. Waitstill had returned to post-war reconstruction work in Prague. "I can't see much prospect of rootage with the family in the mad glare and dash of public life," he wrote her. "Perhaps none of the rest of you three," meaning Martha, Martha Content, and Hastings, "want any rootage, but I suspect that 2 out of the 3 of you do, and want it with thoughts too deep for tears. 7 years ago at this hour, you and I were getting off the train here in Prague's Wilson Station, and all our world has been different ever since. I don't believe that you have ever taken in the continuous sinking feeling that beset the parsonage when you were headed outward. It was so real, you could have weighed it. We finally could not count on you on any time you wouldn't be off to a talk or a tea or a committee meeting or across the continent. There have been times out here when I have been almost desperate between the amount of work to do and the loneliness. I can't touch a woman. I see nothing but men's things in the wardrobe. I smell no perfumes. 7 years ago tonight, we stepped off the train into Wilson Station and into a new world. Martha did not heed his worries. She won the Democratic Party election and went on to stump the district. Writing to Waitstill in June 1946, by which point he had been gone a year, she beamed, "I spoke 14 times last Sunday," and she exulted, "Love all of it," which she did, even though in the end she lost the general election. She had discovered her voice. Martha and Waitstill's marriage limped on for another 8 years. They divorced in 1954. Martha's experiences had changed her. She had outgrown her role of the minister's wife. To return to the beginning, it has been my pleasure to introduce you to a few of my American rescuers. I hope I've been able to convey something of the role of gender, as well as how the operatives both shaped and were shaped by their rescue actions. Most important, I hope I have persuaded you of the significance of the unpredictable and the irrational in our analyses of the past, foregrounding the role of the unpredictable and the irrational infuses the black and white narratives that present history as if logical and orderly, with color, transforming a story with a predictable outcome into an open-ended tale, messy and vivid.